So I'll.
Good. All right, well, let's just start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Lord, for this new year as we begin kind of like a new semester. Guide us with your Spirit always, that we can be your light, your peace, and your love in this world that needs it so desperately. As we pray together, glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Okay, so class begins, a new semester. Welcome, new students. Here we go. So, been to Israel, we're heading back on the 24th, so we're going to do another group, and 8 people coming. And so these little small groups seem to be working out nicely. And we're going to go with Project Genesis in February of 23. So we'll put that trip together now too. So Israel, I've been there. This will be the 19th trip. A good tour guide, when you go to Israel, will tell you you are entering the 5th gospel. Okay, the 5th gospel. You know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, hopefully. But Israel, the land itself, the Holy Land, is the 5th gospel. And when you begin to study the geography and where things are and how they relate to one another, it becomes revelatory. You get more into the whole story of salvation history. So this is not an accident. God planned this. You have that understanding that, God put this stuff together, and this is here and that is there, and that means something. Okay, so Israel, the Holy Land, first off, if you can imagine the rest of the map, have you ever pondered the idea that Israel is the center of the known world, maybe in ancient days? Okay, so you have Europe up here, you got Asia over there, and you got Africa down here. And it's right in the middle. So monkey in the middle. The Jews have a tradition that the 3 sons of Noah, okay, after the flood, the 3 sons went in 3 different directions, maybe the Europeans, the Asians, and the Africans. So coming from here. Okay, so it just goes on and on and on. It's interesting. So you got 3 sections and the 3 different colors here on the map. Here is Jerusalem. One thing I learned very quickly when I got to Jerusalem, I had no idea Bethlehem is only 5 miles away. Okay, I always thought Bethlehem must be off someplace far. It's not. So it's just a little short distance. It's actually 5 miles. The whole state of Israel today is the size of New Jersey. Okay, so you've got about that size. This is the north, this is Galilee. Here's Samaria, and this is Judea. Now, at the time of King David and Solomon, it was all one nation. 12 tribes had returned from the Exodus and occupied the land. There's, in 12 little regions. Unfortunately, after the death of King Solomon, his sons fought over the kingship. So Israel was divided. This became Israel, and this became Judea. And to make matters worse, now we're in the 960 BC, somewhere around there. Okay? What makes matters worse, for the next couple of hundred years, they even war against each other. So that there's 10 tribes up here and 2 tribes down here. This is where we get the name Jude from, Judea, the Judites. In the Gospels, it's interesting to hear St. John's Gospel, especially, whatever, they will say the Jews were whatever, murmuring, the Jews were doing. Well, they're all Jewish. They're all Hebrew. This really means these are Northerners, these are Galileans, and these are Judeans. Now, as time goes by, this is the crowd that's going to survive. And that's where we get the word Jew from. These are the Judites, or the sons of Judah.
So it was 2 against 10, and they survived?
Yeah. So you had the 10 tribes up here, you had 2 tribes down here. Actually, a third of the Levites. The Levites are the priests and the kind of the deacons of the temple. Okay, they're in the south here. So Of course, Jerusalem has the temple. That was going to be a part of the story, that there should only be one temple. But the folks up here built another temple in Mount Gerizim. And these are the Samaritans. There's still Samaritans today in Samaria. There are maybe 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000. And they still have a temple, and they still do animal sacrifice. This small little group in Samaria. Okay, so now we're just going to go through 1,000 years of history, but just give the overall so you can get a little bit of background. Okay, so here is the 10 tribes up here, known as Israel. And this is Judea. Now in 721, the Assyrians come in and clobber these people. Okay, they're destroyed. All the smart people, I guess you'd say, were taken to Assyria, and they dumped all their leftover population here. So this is where you get the Samaritans, who are Jewish, kind of mixed breed. Okay? They're Jewish and pagan, and it gets a mixed kind of a religion up here. These folks down here don't like these folks up here. These people don't like these people. You hear the story of the Samaritan woman, okay, that Jesus goes through Samaria. So that's in, let's see, 721 BC. This is gone. 587 BC, Jerusalem is destroyed by the Babylonians. The Babylonians come and destroy Jerusalem. Okay, 587 BC. So first this part gets clobbered and Israel's destroyed, then Judea is destroyed. Now, there's always still Jews there, still mixed in all these little places, but no political power. Alexander the Great comes along and clobbers the whole place, makes it all kind of a Greek culture. And then we get to the Romans. Okay, and then we get to Jesus. So that's kind of the whole story up to the time of Jesus. So this Samaria is a no man's land. Galilee still has Jewish folks up living here. Nazareth is, where's Nazareth? Nazareth is right there. The widow of Nain, he heals brings back to life the widow of Nain. This is Mount Tabor. There's Cana, and here's the Sea of Galilee. Here's Magdala, here's Capernaum, and here's Bethsaida. Now, it's kind of interesting to know that as I started going to the Holy Land in 1999, there was just a green road sign in Magdala. Just said Magdala. I said, why don't we stop here? Why don't we see something? And they said there was nothing to see. There was a 7-Eleven, there was a campground, and there was, that's about it. So, the campground was bought by the church, so it was a long story there. They dug down 3 feet and found Magdala. Okay, so that's only in 2009. Okay. Capernaum, the town of Jesus, the house of St. Peter, all of this has only been rediscovered, I think, in the 60s, 50s and the 60s. So we looked a little bit at ancient history. Now we're going to go right to kind of modern history. All of these places were lost after centuries and centuries. So there's so much to try to keep putting all these pieces together, the puzzle together. So the Ottoman Turks. Remember, you know the Crusades. Let's just have to throw the Crusades there first. Okay, the Crusades, 1200s. This becomes a Christian area again for 100 years, and the Muslims come back and take it over. All this time now, the Christians are there, the Jews are there, but no political power, no organization. They're not allowed to build any churches and even to repair churches. So a lot of the places just fall apart. There's no way to do archaeology, there's no way to wonder where all these places are. In World War I, the Ottoman Empire sided with the Germans in World War I. So in 1917, they lost. Western powers divided up the Middle East. Then the Western powers decide that England is going to get Palestine, France is going to get Lebanon, and everybody got different parts. This is when they literally drew the line in the sand, kind of just said, okay, you're going to be Iraq, you're going to be Iran, you're here, you're there. It all get that done in World War I. So in 1917, because of the British now have control, Christian by tradition, okay, Jews are allowed to begin to buy land, and they begin, here's Jaffa, here's Tel Aviv right here. Tel Aviv would be right here, just near Jaffa. So Tel Aviv is built and the Jews return. In 1917, then Christians are able to begin to search their stuff, look in their history. So the beginnings of archaeological studies in the area. So I showed these pictures, we'll see in a minute, to one of the guys, and he was there in 1980 at Capernaum, and he said, wow, that wasn't even there. The synagogue was not there, nothing was there. They had found the place, but they redid the stones and made it look like something, the synagogue where Jesus preached, so we'll see that. So all of this here was all just in the last 100 years. I find the meaning of it, I always want to go into the meaning. In this age, this century has been the most atheistic, the most irreligious time in history in the West. And exactly at that time, God is revealing, God is letting, the story is being connected again to these roots in history. So 200 years ago, people would be very skeptical. Capernaum, where is it? There's nothing on the map. We don't know where it is. We didn't understand where it is. Well, we're finding a lot of stuff. A couple of years ago, I read an article that at this stage, the Israelis themselves have discovered 93 archaeological confirmations of people in the Old Testament. 93. The scribe of Jeremiah, he had whatever his name is, I don't know his name, but he had a seal. Everybody had a ring, and he'd seal the wax, to say this is legit and this is from me. They found his ring where it should be in Jerusalem. They call it the city of David now, and it's the palace of the kings of Israel. So that they've rediscovered it, they're digging around as we speak, and found even something like that is insignificant. He's only mentioned once in the Bible, in the prophet, I guess in Jeremiah's book of Jeremiah. But so he found this ring in the place where it should be, at the layer, at the age where it should be. Just fascinating stuff. These are amazing details. So gives you a little bit of a background of how a lot of these Christian places now are being rediscovered. And then since the 1930s, churches are being built on a lot of these ancient spots. Remember, for 300 years, from the time of Constantine to the Muslim invasion, for 300 years, Israel was Christian. And so Israel was a Christian country for 300 years, as well as Jordan and all the rest, Syria, all part of the Byzantine Empire, the Christian Byzantine Empire. So it was thriving. Thousands and thousands of monks and nuns are living all over the Holy Land, in scores and scores of monasteries all over the place. Three things happened in the early 600s that changed everything. Number one, there was a huge earthquake, so a lot of the buildings were lost. Number two, the Persians from Iran, Persia is Iran, Persians and the Romans were always in battle between the East and the West here. So the Persians came and did a devastating blow to the Holy Land. So the Christian empire that was there, the Byzantine Empire, was really whacked. So with the earthquake, with the whacking from the Persians, it was easy for the Muslims to come in 638. So from 638 to whatever, not till now, there's been Muslim control of the Holy Land. except for that 100 years. So Christians were not able to go back to the Holy Land. They're not able to freely go there and build and all the rest. Now it's a safe journey to go. So this is why it's only in the last 100 years. And certainly a lot of people aren't aware of that, that we have access now to all these holy sites, these biblical sites. So, all right, so here's the Sea of Galilee. Here's the Jordan River. And here's the Dead Sea. Okay? Now, this is, again, like I said, the Bible, it's revelatory, right? The land itself, rather, is revelatory. The Jews have an interesting way to see this picture. Here is Caesarea Philippi. Maybe you've heard of Caesarea Philippi. I think that's in the Gospel there. This is a pagan city. Jesus went up there, and on this rock I shall build my church. That's that whole story there. Millions of stories I can go on to, but here is Mount Tabor, Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon, huge mountain. One part is in Lebanon, another part in Syria, and Israel has part of it. There's 3 rivers that, interesting, flow into one river, the Jordan River. I love this too. I mean, the Trinity, one God, 3 persons. You play with it, you play with all these things, right? So there's 3 rivers that that form the Jordan River. It flows down into this lake, the Sea of Galilee. It's fresh water. Then at the other bottom of the lake, then the Jordan River continues into the Dead Sea. The Jews have a beautiful interpretation that, of course, this is sweet water, alive. It's got fish, the fish stories of Jesus and all the fishing stories. So this is alive. Why? Because it receives and it gives. Then the water flows to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is dead because it only takes, it doesn't give. Isn't that amazing? This is the lowest point on the face of the earth. In the Dead Sea, nothing ever leaves it, except evaporation, So you can swim in the Dead Sea, and you float in the Dead Sea. You don't swim, you float. So, fascinating place. So right here, Bethany and Jericho, this is the baptismal site, where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. This place is so cool because why did John the Baptist pick that place? Why did he go there? Because of 2 reasons from Jewish history. Number 1, when the Jews came in from the Exodus, here's Egypt down here, they didn't go this way, they went this way. And they crossed exactly there. So you're leaving Egypt, you're leaving slavery, and you're entering the promised land. So over here is kind of Egypt, the whole experience of the Exodus. So they cross exactly there. Okay, they cross exactly there.
Why would they choose that route? Just out of curiosity, why not go the more direct way?
Right. Yeah, this is the question. Who knows, And I like to just make it simple, You can walk from Cairo to Jerusalem in a week. But they're in there for 40 years in the desert.
No way. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
Okay. They're wandering in the desert.
Yeah, just because you couldn't tell whether there's mountains, but they had to go around or whatever.
Yeah, there's mountains, you can't see it.
Yeah.
But they go out this way, they wander in Saudi Arabia, then they come back to that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So, any questions, keep, ask. So that's a very sacred spot for the Jews. This is where they re-enter the promised land. So, so it's a transition place, okay? Transition from slavery to freedom. Maybe 1,000 years later, 500, 800 years later, the prophet Elijah is being chased from the north to the south by Queen Jezebel. You might have heard her name. he seeks refuge. He goes to that sacred spot. He goes there, and that's where he is taken up in the whirlwind. The story goes, he's taken up at the same spot. So this is sacred to Jews, right? For those two reasons. Look what this means. This is transition from slavery to freedom. Okay, on this level, it's also a transition point between earth and heaven for Elijah. That marks the spot. So John the Baptist didn't go any old place on the river. He wanted to go back to that place. And then you can see how this all lines up together as Jesus takes the next step, obviously, in salvation history from that spot, the sacred spot there. All right, throwing big ideas, lots of stuff. This is really, really fascinating, to me, that all this is taking place in this holy land. Okay, so the place is screaming about the story of salvation history. So it's quite fascinating. Can you see okay? Or one when you're away?
No, that's okay.
Father, just to go back, so the Sea of Galilee is freshwater. It's a lake as opposed to a sea.
Yeah, it's really a lake, but they've always called it a sea. It's big,
Right.
And what is, I might have some pictures as we go through, how far we get, but
how does it compare in size to like Lake Michigan or?
it's 8 miles wide and 14 miles long.
Okay.
You can't see the other side.
No, you can.
You can.
One reason, to go on heights. Okay, this is
If you go
this
up high,
If you go up high enough, you get up.
yeah.
but
So on the Golan Heights, on the other side of the lake, this is now it's part of Israel. Actually, now they have part of the thing that happened in 2017 when Trump recognized Jerusalem. He also recognized the Golan Heights are now part of Israel. That was Syria, but the Syrians were bombing Tiberias just across the lake, shooting them down, and it's 2,000 feet high.
Got it.
So when you're in Tiberias or Magdala, looking across, it's deceptive, especially for Long Islanders, because we stand on Long Island Sound and we see Connecticut, and it's a strip, and we know it's about 10 miles. It's a little bit of a strip. But when you're here and you see across the lake, it's 2,000 feet. So it looks closer. You don't think it's that big, but it is. It's 8 miles away. So it's interesting. I point that out. So this is fresh water, it goes right down through here. And then the other thing I find fascinating is that this whole religious story, the Exodus, Elijah, and John the Baptist, Jesus, this is the lowest point on the face of the earth. I find that so fascinating. Of all the places this story could happen, it's at the lowest point of the earth. So God starts the story low to take us high. I find great meaning, in that. So the lowest point on the earth, he comes down, and then the whole story goes there. And then to go up to Jerusalem. So Jews will always say, you go up to Jerusalem. They don't say go down to Jerusalem, go up. Always up, elevated. All right, so that's a lot there. Questions?
in the Bible, in the New Testament, in the Gospels, Jesus is predominantly preaching in Galilee. Is there a particular reason for that?
Not Samaria.
Right.
Okay, you know that now a little bit. There's the mixed breeds who live in there. This area is pagan and Jewish. It's always remained, there were Jewish towns and pagan towns. This pretty much over here, the Decapolis is pretty much pagan. This would be the Jewish area. So these are the two clusters. Now, at the time of Jesus, there's Jews living in Rome and in every Roman city. So when Jerusalem was destroyed in 587 BC, a lot of folks left and went everywhere else. Okay, they went to Spain, they went to North Africa, they went all over the place, Iran, Iraq. Jewish communities were living in all these Arab countries up until 1948. during the 6-Day War, and not the 6-Day War, it's like 67, but the War of Independence in 1948, then a lot of the Jews came back to Israel after, in 1948. At this point, it's more Jews now are living in the Holy Land for the first time in 2,500 years. Most Jews now live in Israel after 2,500 years. This is an amazing story. We don't have the comprehension and to understand. If you know who Rabbi Gotti is, have you met Rabbi Gotti?
Yes.
You've seen him, I think, right, a few times, some people know. So his family came from Yemen, which is way down there. I love to tell it, it's amazing. His ancestors were sent by King Solomon to minister to the Queen of Sheba, okay, in 960 BC. When they wanted to rebuild the second temple, Nehemiah, after 587 was destroyed, 70 years later, some Jews come back. Remember, they were in Babylon, they were in Iraq and Iran. They were hauled off over to Iran and Iraq. In 587 or whatever it is, in the the 400s BC, they begin to rebuild. Prophet Nehemiah rebuilds the second temple, and that's eventually what Jesus is going to know. That's a whole couple hundred years of development of the temple. King Herod builds it. You heard about his name Herod. It was right at the time of Jesus. Another amazing fact, that Herod built the temple, redid the whole thing. It was never more glorious and beautiful in its whole history as when Our Lady brought baby Jesus into the temple. Amazing. No, that's just coincidence, So little baby Jesus, and Jesus grows up with the temple, and then Jesus makes prophecy that the temple's going down. The temple went down 40 years later. So Jerusalem was destroyed again in 70 AD. Whew. I mean, this is all this history. So Gotti's people were down here. Prophet Nehemiah asked them to come home. Please come home. Help us with the second temple. You guys know first temple. So you've got expertise that we need. Please come home. The rabbis with the Yemenite rabbis just said, nah, we've discerned that the second temple you're building ain't gonna last. We'll be back for the third temple. Okay, so in 1948, 1950, all the Yemenite Jews said, time to go home. So Gotti's grandfather is the first generation putting their children, both grandfathers, everybody left, everybody went back to Israel. So they were going through the desert. The Israeli Air Force picks them up, and the prophecy of Isaiah, which says, I will bring you back on eagle's wings, that mission was called Eagle's Wings.
Wow.
To pick up these folks from Yemen. There was 50,000 of them, and they flew them in the rest of the way to Israel.
Wow.
And didn't anybody write a book on this?
Yeah,
Father Roy will.
Why don't people know this? This is amazing. It's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. So Gotti is the first generation born in Israel. His parents were 5 years old when they made this trek. They remember being in the desert and all those deals. So it's like another Exodus, another mini Exodus. And then his generation is the first generation born in Israel after 2,700 years.
Wow.
yeah.
So why did he leave?
Life in Israel got crazy. And it was just...
When did he come here?
He, in, 95, I think, or something like that?
Oh,
It's been a while.
Okay.
He was in the army. This is another story. Now, you have to know, well, the scripture. I'll tell the story. This is another fascinating thing, just amazing. I said, why did you leave? Why did you come from Israel? Why did you come? Well, there's a lot of things going on. I wanted to be an architect. I was thinking, I got out of the army, but what's happened? Why is this all happening? So he's not really religious at this point, you know, so he doesn't catch the whole historical ideas and stuff, so he's getting, you know, despondent, I guess, you know, with the situation, and is it ever going to be peaceful? He grew up with war, constantly. And so he said I was walking in Jerusalem, I wanted to go to the architect school, turn the corner, and there's 100,000 black hats coming this way. He has to go that way to go register at school. So while they're walking, he doesn't know what's going on. Now, I don't know if you know this story of Emmaus, you know the story of Emmaus. God, he's telling me this story, and he says these words. He says, well, finally, I didn't know what was going on. All these people this way, I'm going this way, I'm trying to go through. And he grabs the guy and he pulls him by the shirt and he says, excuse me, what's going on? That guy says to the guy, are you the only Jew in Jerusalem who doesn't know what is happening? Now, God, he doesn't know the meaning. He doesn't know those words. It's in the gospel. But I'm sitting there going like, are you the only Jew in Jerusalem who doesn't understand what's been going on these days? So, turns out it was the head rabbi's funeral, the chief rabbi of Israel. He didn't even know the guy's name. Okay, didn't know who died, of course, didn't know that. So he has this religious experience, like what do they know that I don't know? So now he goes on the religious quest, and that starts a whole other story. So he comes to New York just to breathe, you know, get into New York, and a whole bunch of stories happen there, you know, so anyway. But so I go to Israel, you know, on my own, and then he'll go and do the Project Genesis trip together. And that's what's really fascinating, you know, to get everything there. Okay, so that's little stories. My goodness, it's so amazing. All right, so there's there, and now we have Jerusalem itself. Okay. So this is the modern map. There's 4 quarters to Jerusalem. Most people don't know that actually half of Jerusalem is Christian. This is the Christian quarter. This is the Armenian quarter. This is the Jewish quarter. This is the Muslim quarter. This is Temple Mount. This is where the Jewish temple was, and now the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock is there. So the Muslims do have control of this land and this quarter, but all Jerusalem now is part of Israel under Israeli protection. Some people, I'm used to it so much now when I see one of these little girls, 18 years old, and they're about this big and they're about that skinny, and I got the machine gun on them, you know. It doesn't bother me anymore. I'm used to it. It's like, oh good, okay, you're here, that's fine. You just go about your business. So the military, cameras, all that kind of security stuff is certainly here. But it's an open city. Everybody can go wherever they want to go. This is the Christian quarter and the Armenian quarter. The Armenians are Christians. The piece of history that made this happen is they were the first nation to accept Christianity. The king became Christian and the whole country. Therefore, they were organized enough to gather money, or however they did it, they bought into the story. So this has been the Armenian quarter since the 300s. So this is the Christian quarter. Now and here is the Holy Sepulchre. This is, in the time of Jesus, the wall went exactly there. So this was the old city, and then this was outside the wall. Now this is the wall. So the city expanded since the time of Jesus, but the old wall is here. And this is a kind of a Via Dolorosa. This is where the trial took place with Pilate. And so the Holy Sepulchre contains Calvary and the tomb in one church. It's only about 200, 300 feet, one place to go. So this is what's there now for the wall. ancient Jerusalem has been rediscovered down here now, outside the wall. This wall was put up by the Muslims in the 1500s. So they excluded this area down here, and that's where the archaeology is now. They're digging around all down there.
So in the Muslim quarter, you've got the Church of St. Anne and the Church of
Right.
something else. So even though it's the Muslim, they're Christian churches?
Yeah, St. Anne. Now, the
Yeah.
Pool of Bethesda is there.
Okay, so they allow that.
Yeah, and this is the traditional site of Mary, Our Lady's birth. She was born near the temple. So she served in the temple, and the whole tradition of the Essene community, perhaps she was an Essene too, who knows how that they were a group that prized celibacy. They were waiting for the new kingdom, to come, and so there is the Essenes with the Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran, we've heard these words, they were celibate men and women. So there was a tradition of this kind of almost monastic Judaism going on before the time of Christ. So the Essenes, that's a whole other story. There was an Essene gate that they've discovered, and so this area, back here, Zion Gate, there's Zion. So out here, this would have been part of the old city in the time of Jesus. This is Mount Zion, and this is where the Last Supper took place, over here.
In the old city, would there have been synagogues
Sure.
in the old city?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at the time of Jesus, there were two ways Jews worshiped: in synagogue worship and temple worship. So most folks would try to get to the temple if you really go good, you get there 3 times a year. For Passover, Sukkot, which is Pentecost, and then for the fall feast of Yom Kippur and all that. That's coming up now as
I
well.
thought temple and synagogue were the same thing.
No, 2 different things, yeah. Temple is for sacrifice. Yeah, so there's only one temple, and now it's been a question for Jews. Where's is it just only in Jerusalem? So pious Jews would all agree there was only one place to do sacrifice, and sacrifice of the lambs. It would be in Jerusalem. I mean, in the temple. But then, of course, the temple gets destroyed. So temple worship ended. Animal sacrifice ended in 70 AD, 40 years after Jesus. So there's no more animal sacrifice, and there's no worship of the temple. Now it's all synagogue. Interestingly, what Catholics did, what early Christians did, they took the 2 types of Jewish worship and put it into the Mass. So we have the Liturgy of the Word, which is really synagogue worship, reading of text, commentary, prayers. That's the Liturgy of the Word. And then we continue with the Liturgy of the Eucharist, the sacrifice of Christ. Redoing the sacrifice of Christ. So there, go on. It just goes on and on and on. It's just amazing. Huh?
We're more Jewish than the Jews.
We are. That's what I try to tell. And actually, another great story. Gabby got to go. We met a friend of mine worked for the Archbishop who ran the Vatican Library and the museum and all that stuff. So he is a VIP kind of guy, and so we've met up with him a few times. He's since retired to France, and he was visiting one time going through Rome and met him again, and he said, "You want to come to Mass tomorrow?" And he didn't know what was going on. It turns out it's Palm Sunday. It's the biggest Mass, okay, I did it the year before, and I was going to give communion, which means you got to get up at 4 a.m. You got to schlep into Rome. You got to go through this crazy security. You got to wait for hours. It was horrible, right? Horrible. But I did it. It's an experience. It's a papal Mass. I didn't even get to see the Pope. We're inside St. Peter's, and when it was time, we came out with the bread, with the hosts, unconsecrated, and we all just lined up. We came out at that point in the Mass. We're standing there, the Pope saying the words, where he's consecrating, where and then we had to go walk a mile to go get communion out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so we did that. So, and in the morning of Palm Sunday the next year, God, he sends me pictures, and I see where he's sitting. I'm like, and I knew he was like the Pope was, the other side of the world. He was sitting with all the cardinals, so this guy got him in, and the Archbishop said, come with, and then he sent a car for him. Okay, so Gotti and a congregant, another a woman there that was traveling, they drove into the Vatican, to the door where the Pope comes in, comes through the St. Peter's and takes a seat. Watch this whole
No waiting
mess.
for hours.
No waiting for hours, front row right there.
So you know where you are on the line, right?
Right. So Gotti says, though, very profound, he said, you know what? This is what temple worship was like. You people have continued it. He says, look at this. There's priests, there's incense, there's candles, there's all this stuff happening. This is what would have happened in Jerusalem on all the feast days. And now I get a chance to apprehend it a little bit. He said, this is what would happen. So again, God made this, and this is the spot. Now, another really important thing to know about Jerusalem, it's like, you might describe it, let's see, like, here's the flat land, this is the north part up here. It's kind of flat, and then what happens, two valleys come down, and then they meet. Okay, so you've got the Kidron Valley and then this other valley. This valley is all built over, you really can't see it anymore. But there was two valleys, and up here is the Mount of Olives, which is higher, and this is higher than the Temple Mount. So it's the perfect amphitheater. This is how 1 million Jews could be over here at the Mount of Olives, standing on all these mountains surrounding. So basically, you come, it's a perfect metaphor here. You're striving to go to Jerusalem, and you want to see the temple, and you're walking up and up and up and up. Do you see anything? No, I don't see anything. Do you see it? Do you see it? We're walking and walking up, up, up. And you come to the ridge, and there's the whole thing. Then you have to go back down to go back up again. So here would be the temple, actually lower than the Mount of Olives and these mountains around here. So this is where you can get 1 million Jews on these big feast days to watch the temple do its thing. Amazing, amazing. So when, I'll tell you that story, there's the Divine Mercy. They think, speculate, that at the time of Jesus' death, it was the Passover, 100,000 lambs would have been sacrificed that day. So now the blood, of course, is what you use to purify, and to wash away sin. You're washed in the blood of the lamb, and that's where this idea comes from. So all this blood, these lambs are being sacrificed, and all 1 million Jews have to eat some lamb tonight. That's part of the Passover. You have to eat the lamb, eat the flesh. Sounding familiar? You have to eat the lamb. So 100,000 lambs, all that blood, once it was spilled onto the altar, you just keep doing it. 100,000 lambs over and over. All this blood is in troughs, and it would come out of the temple in troughs. Then other priests and the Levites or whoever would have to flush it out because it would coagulate. And it's spring, it's April, so it's warm. So the blood is coagulating, and they flush it out with water. Okay? So when you're standing on the Mount of Olives, you're seeing the temple, you see all this activity, but from the temple, you're seeing blood and water, blood and water, all afternoon, blood and water. the temple was a sin-forgiving factory. Okay, so everybody was watching it, and later in the day you'd get your piece of the lamb, cook it, and you do the Passover, do the Seder. So so when John the apostle is at the cross, and the Roman soldier takes the spear, and what does he say? Out of the heart of Jesus came blood and water. Bingo. Jesus is the temple. He is the temple. He's the lamb, he's the priest, he's the victim, he's the temple. It's all rolled into one. Into him, his person. So that's why John makes a big deal about it in the gospel. He says, I saw this. I saw blood and water come from his side. So he's doing what the temple represents.
I'm looking at the map and where the temple would have been, and the Via Dolorosa being like right there. So, Jesus, the blood, the lamb, is coming from the temple, and it's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's outside the wall, and as the sacrifice of on Temple Mount, the lambs are being sacrificed. So he is, it's all happening at the same moment. It's all happening. So so the land just screams it. Everything is with there, and you have to begin to try to understand as much as you can.
What was the day, according to the temple, that they killed all those lambs? What was the
Passover.
So Jesus died on Passover?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, there's a big discussion, which I agree with, in the gospel, see, the lambs are sacrificed, and it was Friday, and the Passover Seder was Friday night for the temple. I believe, and many people believe, that actually Jesus celebrated the Passover on the Essene calendar, and that was always on a Tuesday. So this was always disturbing to me as I go through Holy Week every year, that how did he get to Caiaphas, to Pilate, and then to the other guy, I forget who else you guys will see, 3 different trials, examinations, and all this stuff happened in one night, and I can't imagine Pilate getting up in the middle of the night, really, to have to do all this stuff. So I think it did happen Tuesday night, and Wednesday, Thursday go all these trials, and then he is crucified on Friday.
Mm.
So the Essenes had a different calendar, so they would have done the Seder, they would have done the Passover, but on a different day, on Tuesday.
Is that why some people think Jesus might have been an Essene?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I absolutely. Now, this is what, when you go back, this is so ridiculous. Here's some of these people. Here's Qumran, right here.
Yeah.
To go from here to here is like 4 or 5 miles, which is absolutely nothing. So, to think that John the Baptist, the spiritual seeker, never went to Qumran, or had no connection to Qumran, it's impossible. That's an act of faith to believe that he didn't. And Jesus would have hung out there too. And this is the baptismal site. This is where he goes in the desert. Jesus does the 40-day desert walk. It's right there.
And what's Qumran?
There's Qumran, yeah.
What happens?
Well,
I don't know.
Qumran is the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
You've heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Yeah. So they were discovered there. It was a Jewish monastery. And these people were priests. They were descendant, priesthood was father to son. So you have a priestly family. So a lot of the folks that were in Jerusalem began to say, wait, this is so corrupt. The temple's corrupt. And the priesthood is corrupt. It's supposed to be a lifelong thing, like the Pope, that the high priest, but what the Romans did, and some of the Jews, they bought and sold who was going to be the high priest for that year. It's supposed to be a lifelong thing. So once you're made the high priest, you do it for your life. But then they started selling it every year who could put the top bid. So, you know, so these people thought that Jerusalem was totally corrupt. They went out into the desert, waiting for the Messiah, waiting for, you know, so this is maybe 200 or 300 years, no, maybe 150, 200 years before Christ. The folks in Qumran are doing their monastery. And then they get clobbered by the Romans. The Romans came in 70 AD and destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed Qumran. So that's why they took their scrolls and they put them up in the hills and hid them so that they thought they'd come back to get them, and of course they never did. And so what the Dead Sea Scrolls tells us too is that the what another big criticism, biblical criticism, whatever, you know, all these scholars for centuries were saying, you know, we don't know. The oldest text we have of the Old Testament only goes back to maybe 1000 AD. How do we know that it was correct? The words are correct. So what we've discovered in the Dead Sea Scroll, we have the whole book of Isaiah, and word for word, there's a few little things that are different. But we have so many biblical texts that predate Christianity. So we know now that the monks, the Christian monks that transcribed and the Jewish scribes that transcribed all these texts were accurate. What we have received in the modern era is exactly what was found in Qumran. So it verified that we can believe the scriptures are authentic, that nobody monkeyed with it along the way. There's some variations, little, you know, but what they did, you know, what Qumran gave to the world was that, you know, the Bible is the Bible. You know, pretty much we have all these books of the Bible that predate Christianity, because of course everybody believed the church was corrupt and they just made all these stories up and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, the extreme people would say there's no truth to any of the Bible because, you know, it just got written. It's just fictitious stories. So archaeology, like I said, in the last 100 years, we've, you know, in the midst of of this very atheistic time, God is providing verification for the story. You know, and if you want to believe it, you believe it. You don't believe it, all right, of course.
I've heard many stories of atheists, modern, you know, day atheists, saying that they were purposely trying to discredit Christianity, the Catholic Church, whatever. And in doing their research, they found all this. And now they're like traditional Catholics.
Yeah,
they've gone from one side. You know.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is fascinating.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what's happening with a lot of evangelical Protestants is that they're discovering Judaism, and there's an interest for things Jewish. And when they do that, they'll see, wait a minute, there is history, there is tradition, there is ritual, there is law, there is, and that's all Catholic. That's what we took from Judaism. So, you know, the church went through its history, you know, the Orthodox and the Catholics. Well, not so happy history, but there it is. So you get to go to Jerusalem, and you're just immersed in this, you know, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I've been there. Almost a year of my life has been in the Holy Land, and it still calls me, draws me just to go, you know, to be there. So here is, I don't know if I can, is this going to play? Is it moving? Yeah, okay. So this, I'm on the Mount of Olives now. This is where they're digging now, underneath this area. Here's the Temple Mount.
That's the big temple that was on the map?
Well, this spot here is the Dome of the Rock. That is, this is where the temple stood. So I'm not even at the top. I'm across the Kidron Valley. I'm up on the Mount of Olives, looking. It's a very, you know, you've maybe seen this picture before. It's the view of Jerusalem that people always kind of get to see. So this is the Kidron Valley, and then over here on the Mount of Olives is a lot of the Jewish cemeteries. They believe that those folks that are buried on the Mount of Olives will resurrect first when the Messiah comes. So that's why they want that.
How do you get in there? Is it? Is it?
Well, you get in there. You go through the temple. You go through the temple. You Very expensive.
Oh.
Apparently it's
Just wondering.
$100,000 to get a grave.
Really?
To get a grave, yeah.
Who's owns it?
I don't know. It's just part of it.
Some smart person.
Yeah, I don't know.
Are there Jews now that believe in resurrection, and are there Jews now that don't believe in resurrection?
Wherever you have two Jews,
You have three
three
opinions.
opinions. Two Jews, three opinions. So it's a mixed bag. Depends on what your rabbi teaches, but most Jews, certainly Gotti, believes in afterlife and resurrection. Yeah. So this is
So the topography, though, you're up on the Mount of Olives. If you were to attack Jerusalem, you had to go down the hill
down and up.
and then go up.
Okay, here. Okay, let me.
What are those walls? Are those walls?
Okay, this is the wall that was
That's the
built by
wall, right?
Yeah, this is the Golden Gate. This is the ancient gate that went into Jerusalem. There would have been, in the time of Jesus, maybe a bridge going across a little bit of it, and this is where traditionally comes in on Palm Sunday, through the gate. The tradition is that he'll return to Jerusalem through that gate, and the Muslims bricked it up. Okay, so they bricked it up.
That'll stop them.
I don't see an opening
Yeah,
there.
there's no opening, yeah, it's closed, so, yeah.
You really think that those bricks are gonna stop them?
We don't know. That's what they hope, I guess. So, this is the Palm Sunday walk. We know this is a correct spot because it's surrounded by cemeteries. Jews don't walk through cemeteries, and the priests will be walking through the cemetery. So this is the road that Jesus came on the donkey on Palm Sunday, came down this. So it's called the Palm Sunday walk. So there's called the Dome of the Rock. It's a mosque, a shrine, that's built on the spot where the temple once stood. Now behind over here, so right there, I think that's it there, it's not so clear. That's the Holy Sepulchre. So the Holy Sepulchre is on the other side. It's a big.
Well, that's a good picture.
There's Rabbi Gotti and some of our pilgrims. There, I am there.
That's
You
nice.
really can. Yeah, it's right there. Can't really see it too well. But it just gives you a little idea. It's very steep, walking down there. It's they've kind of railings to hold on to because sometimes it just goes down. Here's the cemetery. You can see all these graves here. That's a nice shot there. Let me see if we can. Yeah, so this is the Lutheran Church here. This is the Holy Sepulchre. This is the Latin Patriarchate. That's the Catholic cathedral, you'd say. The Patriarch is there. And this is the Dome of the Rock. And then over here is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So the Muslims do have control of the whole Temple Mount. That's been reserved there. Now in the Holy Sepulchre, there's two domes, one over the Calvary and the other one's over the tomb. And in the Holy Sepulchre, by tradition, 5 different churches have privilege to have Mass in there. So you have the Roman Catholics, the Latins, that we call Latin, the Greeks, Greek Orthodox, the Armenians, the Coptic, the Egyptian Christians, and then the Ethiopian Christians. Nobody else can have any worship there. Everybody can visit the Holy Sepulchre. Everybody's welcome to visit, but you can't have a Mass.
Who's the last one? Ethiopian?
Ethiopian, yeah, Ethiopians.
And
So they
when
have
was
one
that-
little place.
When was that determined, that
It's called the status quo, and it just has been there since forever. There's just no more time in the day to have all these masses and all these groups, coming. And so they've left it, of course Protestants want to, well, they've discovered a place they call it the Garden Tomb, and they have another place where they can pray. But the Lutherans are here. They want real estate right here. they're right next to, and then they're actually on what was the Holy Sepulchre back in the day. What we have today, and this is another terrible part of the story that I never knew, and I've been there 6, 7 times, never wondering, wait a minute, this is a Crusader church. This church was built in the 1200s. What happened to Constantine's church? And they didn't really want to answer the question, and very quietly, because there's people all over the place, he says, the Muslims destroyed it. I never heard of it. The Sultan in 1009, and do you think that was a precursor for the Crusade? Hello. All right, 1009, the whole Holy Sepulchre was destroyed by the Muslims. So that Constantinian church was there for 700 years. So from the 300s to the 1009. So when the Crusaders got there, they had to rebuild the Holy Sepulchre. So that's really from the 1200s. There's ancient parts that are older, but not much was left. Even the cave where Jesus' body laid, that was destroyed. And so what you see today is like a little church over the spot. There's some natural stone that's there, but the cave was destroyed. That was amazing. And like, why don't we know this stuff? Why don't we know this? This is our history. Yeah. So let's see. This is just interesting. This is the Crown of Thorns. Look at these.
Yes.
So
Oh,
they're
that's what they used for.
yeah, this is the branch. So they have them planted around the churches, just to let people see, what the actual Crown of Thorns was made of.
How big are they?
They're about 2 inches. Yeah. So it really is an amazing thing to see. I think when I finally got to look at them. So this is from 2 different times of the year. The other one, they were flowering, and now these are, just a green tree. So they would cut the branches, and that was what they used. I touched it, and wow, it's very sharp. So, actually got a little blood flow there. This is, the pilgrims. It's amazing. This, now, since COVID, the groups are way down, the numbers of people that are going. But this is right before COVID. We were there the last day when Israel closed the airport. So we got out the last minute,
Wow.
literally the last minute. And so we didn't lose any days there, and the place was packed. There was never, I never
What are you
saw
online?
that many pilgrims. This was just going down the Palm Sunday walk to go down to the, now at the bottom of this is the Church of Gethsemane. That's where the arrest took place. So the Garden of Gethsemane is at the bottom of the hill. So you can see the Jewish cemetery there. Notice all the rocks on the graves. The Jews have the tradition of putting the rock, and now the Catholics are doing it. If you go to the Catholic cemetery, you see a
Yeah, my
lot of,
father's got it all.
yeah, you put the rocks on there. The reason being, the ancient reason was to preserve the body, keep animals from disturbing the grave, and put all the stones on it. But now it's become to say, I was here.
Yeah.
Offer a prayer. So these graves here are just really expensive.
Those $100,000?
100,000. Mm-hmm.
You got 5 of them,
And
right?
they're all on top of the ground.
Yeah, I don't know how it all gets done. I've never inspected it to go in there and try to figure it out. Because they're not very long. I don't know if it's just a monument on top of what they put in the ground. I don't know. But they're usually buried not in caskets. They're buried in a shroud.
Okay.
It's a Jewish custom that just buried. It's Americans that use caskets, but in Israel, sometimes I guess they use caskets too. But the tradition was just in a shroud. This is cool. This is those are actual mustard seeds. Okay, and there was a mustard tree that's near this church, and I was surprised. When you look at Goulden's mustard, I thought those were crushed. But that's actually the seeds in the Goulden's mustard. So they really are very, very tiny. But the point of the story we don't appreciate the idea, you know, a mustard tree is a bush, it's really a bush, it's not that big, really, but the seeds are tiny. But what's distinctive about the mustard bush is that the roots are so deep. And so this is the meaning when Jesus uses that, you know, the analogy or the parable. You cannot ever destroy a mustard tree. It's impossible. You think you've pulled it out. Farmers, it's very invasive, so farmers don't want to plant them. They're terrible because they just keep growing and growing. But you cut them back, you try to pull everything out of the soil, every little root. One little piece of the seed or the root that remains, come back in a year and it'll be there, it will be back. So this is the idea of the kingdom in the church. You know, you try to kill it, but it's coming back. Yeah. That's cool. So this is to the kind of the north from the Mount of Olives. This is a Russian church, St. Mary Magdalene, and the Tsars built it in around 1900 before the Russian Revolution. Now that's another big story too. Everywhere you go are Russians in Jerusalem. So they are repopulating all of the monasteries. The Greeks are not having vocations from Greece, Europe, and just like here, you know, vocations are low. So all these monasteries all over the Holy Land that still exist are now being repopulated by young monks and nuns from Russia.
Wow.
Russia has built, in the last 20 years, 20,000 churches all over Russia. So there's a huge religious revival happening in Russia, producing tons of vocations. So when you go to the Holy Land, you'll see all these young monks and nuns running around, plus the people. They're the biggest group that goes to Jerusalem now, are Russian Orthodox. Yeah. Now they can't have a mass in the Holy Sepulchre because they're not on the list. You know, they didn't make the list. They're a new church. They're only 1,000 years old. So the Holy Sepulchre was 1,000 years before that. So the Russians didn't get real estate, but they have a monastery right next to the Holy Sepulchre.
Now, is that due to Putin, or is he
Yeah.
a big?
Putin is working it. He's working out, you know, like hyper-Christianity, but certainly the Patriarch of Moscow. Moscow has traditionally, for 1,000 years, claimed to be the third Rome. The first Rome was Rome, the second Rome was Constantinople, and the third Rome is Moscow. So the Russian Empire, all these centuries for 1,000 years, has claimed like they are the real leftovers of the Byzantine Empire and the third Rome. So they went through their atheist period, you know, with communism, but the church is back hugely. Now, I can't say I agree with everything that the Patriarch is doing. He'll be there right next to Putin, blessing missiles and bombs and all kinds of stuff. I have pictures that on the Air Force, on the Russian Air Force, they painted icons on the bottom of the plane, so it looks like the angels are flying, like St. Michael the Archangel and all these. It's amazing. It's like, what is this? Holy mackerel! It is what it is. Just reporting. So the Russians are at least a third of all the pilgrims that are going to Holy Land. So you'll always hear Russian.
Wasn't traditionally Armenians the most populous there?
No, they were. I mean, they own a piece of the. You know, you missed that part when you did Jerusalem. They have a quarter, the Armenian quarter. There's not so many Armenians there at the moment. You know, there's a couple thousand, maybe 1,000 or 2, that live in the city, in the old city. Not, for maybe 1,000. They have a big monastery school, so people will come from Armenia and the diaspora, all the Armenians, people from California, and they'll go to school there. They have a beautiful choir, and they sing in the Holy Supper all the time. So this is the church called Dominus Flivit.
What time of the year was
Where
this?
the Lord wept. This is February.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're a little cool. People still have jackets on and stuff.
This is what, this is what?
It's called Dominus Flivit, where the Lord wept, where Jesus wept over Jerusalem. Hail Jerusalem, Jerusalem, if I could have gathered you like a mother hen, but you refused me. And, you know. So King David also wept on the Mount of Olives when he was leaving Jerusalem. So it's all these stories are connected. That's a nice fancy picture kind of thing. Again, the rock. Yeah, you can see. Yeah, here's the only stuff up there. So there's the walk again. There's the Dominus Flivit. Now this was built in 1930 something by this guy Bertolucci, I think is how you say his name. Big architect from Italy, and he built all these churches all over the Holy Land. So there's about 6 or 7 of them. So they're all from the 1930s. It's made in a teardrop shape. Very pretty. I like that mass up there. It's really beautiful. Because this is the altar, and you look out and you see there's the there's the Dome of the Rock. So beautiful. There's a mosaic right here. You can see it in the picture here on my phone. You can't see it. And it's the mother hen with all the chicks. And just kind of looking to the south, you can see the wall here. Right here would be the staircase. The Israelis have really done incredible archaeology. And there's a staircase there that was the entrance to the temple. Our Lady would have brought baby Jesus up those steps. Well, this is just amazing to be there. This is the Church of the Dormition, where there is a minor tradition that Our Lady was assumed on Mount Zion. This is Mount Zion. Then right over here would be the Last Supper. Unfortunately, again, what is built by the Crusaders marking the spot. Remember, Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. They know where these places are. You know, the Christians knew. So when the Crusaders came back, they built a building on top of the spot where the Last Supper took place. The room is not there anymore, but the spot is there. But unfortunately, it was taken over by the Muslims, so it's a mosque. So we can't have a mass in there. The Pope had one mass inside that Senate. It's called the Senate. So when you enter it, it is just a room. It's a mosque. The Franciscans have the other side of the wall, and they have a little chapel there. Yeah, spot there for mass. This is some of the folks at the wall. They all have the box on their head with the scripture in it. So keep the scriptures on your mind. They take it literally. So put my word on your mind and near your heart, and they have all this love. I don't know why this not used to play. I don't know what they've done with it. Oh, that helps. This is Shepherd's Fields, where the angels greeted the shepherds and sang glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of goodwill. This group came in. We were singing in English, and then they came in, and this is Korean, so they just picked up the song.
Oh.
It was so beautiful. Merry Christmas. It's February. It's interesting when you go to the Holy Land. This is beautiful. I love this. This is like a cool picture. This is in the old city. And people hang out, play music. You see the nun there. Christians, Jews, Muslims, all. So people are terrified to go to Jerusalem. Oh my God, you may die if you're killed. What about Chicago? Anybody want to go to Chicago? Really fun. It's a beautiful city. Amazing.
Can you get a cold beer there?
Yeah. Do you ever? Sure. I'll take it to my office. Close the shop for the night.
Istanbul?
No, this is Jerusalem.
I know, is that it? Is this a market?
Yeah, it's the market.
Istanbul.
Like,
It's just, yeah, they're all, all the markets are pretty similar. Oh, this is beautiful.
Where the hell is that?
We are in the Judean desert. He's singing the 23rd Psalm in Hebrew. The Lord is my shepherd. That's St. George Monastery down in there.
Wow.
And where are we at?
In the Judean desert on the way to Jericho, out south of Jerusalem. So on the way to the Dead Sea.
how do you get there? Is there any?
There's a highway. Yeah, the highway. But we got off the highway, and this is a famous place that people overlook the monastery, just can't forget it. And this is where Jesus went into the desert, during the temptation.
I thought the desert was flat and just sand.
Yeah, there's the monastery. Wow.
So this is the terrain when they came in from Egypt. They came this
Well,
way.
they went around
They
that.
went around.
They went around
it.
That's, I guess, why they went around. It's pretty hard to be.
What denomination would that be?
That's Greek Orthodox.
Who's doing the singing?
Got it.
Got it.
And he's chanting the 23rd Psalm.
When they built the church in that section, how did they carry the rocks and everything in there?
Right there, just
Right there, just chiseled away.
chisel and build.
Wow. Okay.
Now this valley, beautiful little bit of history. This valley goes all the way to Jerusalem.
Okay.
And if you know the prophecy of Ezekiel. Right. Anyway, that the temple, the water is going to flow out of the temple.
Yeah.
And it's going to go down through this valley. There is water down there, but it's supposed to flow out of the temple and then make the Dead Sea alive.
When is that gonna happen, or?
In the new king, in the kingdom, in the fullness of the kingdom. That's one of the prophecies. And then you say too, the prophecies about the desert will bloom, and you go to all these places and you'll see big forests, a big plantation of whatever, date trees and all kinds of stuff. So it's an amazing place. Well, this is funny. We're going up Mount Tabor, and it's hairpin turns to go up on top. In a little van like this, so people scream and
That's a two-way road.
Yeah, 2 ways, yeah. People
Are they saying the rosary?
yeah.
Yeah.
Here we are. Look down there. Oh my goodness.
Now, out off the mountain, you see a flat area. That's called Megiddo in Hebrew, or Armageddon in Greek. It's the Battle of Armageddon. Theoretically, would be in that spot.
Now there's no wall on this one. I know how to build the train.
John would have his hand over his eyes. He wouldn't.
You wouldn't do it? You wouldn't like this?
Yeah, this is it.
This is the road Jesus took.
Here we go.
And what if this is another car coming the other way?
Yeah, you just gotta move over and squeeze through.
It's like that in many
No
places.
signs that
It
says
sure is.
left
It
lane
is.
closed.
I was thinking of Lisa's house when you
When you see another car coming, then you have to really pull over.
Oh my God. Look at the snow up there.
Yeah.
With snow, you said?
I think it snows.
Once in a while it snows, yeah, once in a while.
Trying to say Christ up there. You have to take a tram to get up there. Get up there. Those clouds. So they kept on going past the clouds.
Now, what's interesting about Mount Tabor, when you saw the map, this is the entrance to this is the Transfiguration, the mountain of the Transfiguration. So, Mount Tabor. So I suppose, you know, of course there's no scripture talking about it, but Nazareth is built on this sloping hill, then it gets real flat and it goes out into Armageddon and it's all flat. And right in the middle of nowhere is this one perfectly triangular mountain. That's Mount Tabor. It just picks up, and not related to any other mountain around it, just that spot. So I imagine that Jesus, being a kid, would have seen that mountain from Nazareth and said, wow, what do I want there? Find the mountain. So that Jesus took Peter, James, and John and the other guys up that mountain to a place he knew he would go there all as a kid. So he took them to that spot, and they had a whole transfiguration story. So the church, I give just one, I think I have a quick picture of the church. This is inside the church, and Barlucci did this one too. So 1930s. So he built it, so when you walk in, you see these two altars. This represents the divinity of Christ, and this represents the humanity of Christ. So they did the human and divine kind of architecture. And on the Feast of the Transfiguration, I think it's August 6th or 7th, the church is built that as the sun rises, the first light shoots right onto this image of Jesus with the Transfiguration. Here's Moses and Elijah. And then another story, when we got up there and Gotti was on the Catholic trip, and I wanted to see all these Catholic sites, he'd never seen them. So after the whole thing, I mean, this is a lot. You know, this is real Christianity. This is divinity of Christ. This is all this stuff, you know. So at the end, we're walking back to the vans, and I said, "Well, what do you think of that little place?" He said, "We had a mass, we had stuff." And he said, "Wow, Moses made it." Now, if you know what that means, Moses never made it to the Promised Land. He dies on Mount Tabor. He's not able to cross the Jordan River into the Promised Land because of his sin. And so he dies on Mount Tabor. He can see the Promised Land. When you're up on Mount Tabor, you can see the whole thing. You can see Jerusalem, you can see all the way to the Sea of Galilee, you can see a lot. And so Moses saw it, but didn't get to go into it. But he was so struck that he says, well, if this story is true, Moses made it to Mount Tabor. He made it to the promised land. I said, well, you get on the other side and go any way you want. So he was really struck with Moses and Elijah. And they have little chapels in there too, one to Moses and one to Elijah. Very cool. All right, we gotta go to church. I think you want to go to church now? We'll do church.
Yes.